The social worker slid the black trash bag across the table. She didn't look up. She never did. That's all your belongings, Wren. Good luck out there. I stared at the bag. 20 years of my life fit inside it. 2 pairs of jeans, 4 t-shirts, a hairbrush with missing teeth, a stuffed rabbit named Button that I'd had since I was 6, and somewhere at the bottom wrapped in an old sock, $142 in crumpled bills. That was everything. That was me. The clock on the wall behind her ticked past 9 in the morning, September 14th, my 20th birthday, the exact day the state of Missouri decided I was no longer their problem. I picked up the bag. It weighed less than a bag of groceries. "Do you need someone to call for you, honey?" she asked, still looking at her computer. "No," I said. "There's nobody." And that was the truth. That had been the truth for 15 years. I walked out of the Kansas City Department of Social Services and stood on the sidewalk in the September sunshine, and for the first time in my adult life, no one on this earth was expecting me anywhere. 3 weeks later, I would be standing in front of a 100-year-old barn in Kansas, holding a brass key that would lead me to the secret my grandfather had kept for the entirety of his life. But I didn't know that yet. On that Tuesday morning, I only knew that I was hungry and I was scared, and I needed to find a room before nightfall. I found one. $11 a night at a motel on Truman Road where the door didn't lock properly and someone had punched a hole in the bathroom wall. I ate cold peanut butter from a jar with a plastic spoon. I watched the parking lot from the window until the sun went down, and I tried very hard not to cry, because crying was a luxury for people who had somewhere to be sad. I was 5 years old the last time I had a family. I remember pieces of it. My father's voice reading me stories, the smell of pine soap, a woman with dark hair who I now know was my stepmother, Delphine Cross, standing at the kitchen sink with her back to me. My mother, Margaret, had died in a car accident when I was 3. I don't remember her at all, just a warm shape, like the ghost of a hug. My father, Thomas Ashby, died when I was 5. Heart failure, they told me later. Sudden, unexplainable. He was 34 years old. After that, Delphine drove me to a brick building in downtown Kansas City and left me in a folding chair with a styrofoam cup of apple juice. She told the woman at the desk she couldn't afford to raise a child that wasn't hers. She told them I had no other relatives, and then she walked out the door, and I never saw her again. For 15 years I lived in that system, group homes, foster placements that lasted 6 months if I was lucky, a family in Springfield who gave me back after a summer because I wasn't a good fit, a family in Independence who gave me back after Christmas because their real daughter didn't like sharing her room. By the time I was 12, I had stopped unpacking my suitcase. By the time I was 16, I had stopped hoping. And now I was 20, and I was free. And free felt exactly like being thrown into a lake with your hands tied. The letter came on the 3rd day. I had walked to the public library to use the computers, because that's what you do when you have no phone and no address and no plan. The librarian, an older woman with kind eyes and reading glasses on a beaded chain, recognized me from all my hours there over the years. She waved me over to her desk. "Wren, honey, someone dropped this off for you yesterday. Said the social services office redirected them here." She handed me a cream-colored envelope. Real paper. Heavy. The kind of paper that meant something important. My name was written on the front in careful cursive. Miss Wren Elise Ashby. I sat down in one of the wooden chairs by the window. I opened the envelope with hands that were suddenly cold. The letter was from a law office in Ashford, Kansas, from an attorney named Jasper Halloway. The letter was short, and it changed everything. "Dear Miss Ashby, I have been attempting to locate you for the last 92 days on behalf of my late client, your grandfather, Mr. Silas Ashby, who passed away on June the 18th of this year. Mr. Ashby left his entire estate to you. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, Jasper T. Halloway, Esquire." I read it 4 times. My grandfather. Delphine had told me my grandfather died before I was born. She had told me that every time I asked. She had told the state that too. It was written in my file. No known living relatives. But Silas Ashby had just died 3 months ago. I sat in that library chair and I felt something I hadn't felt In 15 years, I felt angry. Not the tired anger of a foster kid, not the resigned anger of someone who has learned that life is unfair. A real, hot, alive kind of anger. Someone had lied to me. Someone had kept me from a family I didn't know I had. Let me pause here for just a moment. If you have ever been lied to by someone you trusted about your own family, I want you to comment below. Tell me your story, because I know Ren isn't alone in this, and I want her to know that. Do you think she should trust this letter, or is it too good to be true? Let me know before we continue. That night from the motel payphone, I called Delphine. I hadn't spoken to her in 15 years. I didn't know why I had her number memorized. I think a child keeps the phone number of the person who left them the way a soldier keeps a bullet in his pocket, as proof it was real. She answered on the fourth ring. Hello. Her voice was exactly the same, cold, polished, like a stone worn smooth by expensive water. Delphine, it's Ren. There was a silence on the line, not a normal silence, the silence of someone who has just been shown a photograph of their own funeral. Ren, she said. Well, this is a surprise. You told me my grandfather was dead. He was. He died 3 months ago, Delphine. His lawyer just wrote to me. Another silence. Longer this time. I heard her breathing. That old man was insane, Ren. Whatever he left, you don't touch it. Don't go there. There's nothing for you in Kansas. How did you know he was in Kansas? The silence broke. A man's voice in the background. Corbin, her son, my stepbrother. He was 2 years older than me. I remembered him only vaguely. A boy in a green sweater who never spoke to me. Give me the phone, Mom. Corbin's voice came on, deeper than I remembered, slick. Sis, listen. My mother and I have been dealing with your grandfather's estate for months. There's nothing there. The property is worthless. There's tax debt. There's structural problems. Don't waste your money on a bus ticket. I never told you where I was going. The line went quiet. Then he laughed. But it wasn't a real laugh. It was the laugh of a man who has just realized he said too much. Ren, come on. Where else would you go? Look, if you need money, we can help. We can wire you a couple thousand. Just don't go to Kansas. I hung up the phone. I stood in that motel parking lot in the Missouri dark, and I understood two things at once. The first was that Delphine and Corbin were afraid. They were afraid of something in Kansas, something my grandfather had left behind. The second was that whatever it was, they didn't want me to have it, which meant it was mine. 2 days later, I bought a Greyhound bus ticket to Ashford, Kansas. It cost me $47. It left me with less than 100 to my name, but I was going. The bus ride took 14 hours. I sat by the window and watched Missouri turn into Kansas, and I watched Kansas open up like a hand unfolding. The fields went on forever. Cornfields turning gold. Wheat fields the color of a lion's back. Little white farmhouses in the middle of nothing with pickup trucks parked out front and dogs sleeping on porches. I had never seen sky like that in my life. Not the sky of a city, the sky of God, blue and huge and full of clouds like ships. I got off the bus in Ashford at sundown. The town was small, 2 stoplights, a main street that ran 4 blocks, a diner called Millie's with a red neon sign, a feed store with a wooden porch, a Methodist church white with a black steeple, a hardware store, a little library with geraniums in the window boxes. Population, according to the sign at the edge of town, 3,800 souls. The evening light was purple and orange, like a bruise turning into a sunrise. And somewhere out past the edge of town, past the wheat fields, a windmill was turning slow against the sky. I stood on the sidewalk with my trash bag in my hand, and I felt something strange. I felt like I had been here before. Not in a big way, in a small way. The way a smell reminds you of something you can't quite name. Let me stop for just a second. Have you ever arrived somewhere for the first time and felt like a piece of you was already there waiting? Some place that felt like home before you even knew what home was. Tell me about that place in the comments. I want to hear. Jasper Holloway's office was on Main Street above the hardware store. I climbed a narrow staircase that smelled like cedar and old paper. Jasper Holloway was 78 years old. He wore a flannel shirt under a wool cardigan. His hands trembled a little when he shook mine, but his eyes were sharp as a hawk. He had a photograph of a woman on his desk who I would later learn had died 40 years earlier, and he still spoke about her in the present tense. "Miss Ashby," he said, "I've been waiting for you for a long time." He asked me to sit. He poured me a cup of coffee from an ancient percolator. He didn't ask me any of the questions I was used to being asked. He didn't ask what I was going to do with my life. He didn't ask where I was staying. He just looked at me like I was a person, and it took everything I had not to cry. "Your grandfather," he said, "asked me to give you this if he passed before you found him." He slid an envelope across the desk. My name in that same careful cursive. "He wrote it over 20 years ago, Miss Ashby. He rewrote it every 5 years to keep it current. The last version is from March." "March of this year?" "Yes, ma'am." My hands were shaking. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded twice. "My dearest Wren, if you are reading this, it means I passed before I found you. I am so sorry. I have tried, my girl. I have tried every year. Your stepmother lied to you. She lied to everyone. I am not dead. I was not dead. I was here waiting for you. Come to Willow Creek Farm on Willow Creek Road. Come to the old barn. Look under the 3rd floorboard from the door. What I left there will explain everything. I love you. I have always loved you. Grandpa." I sat in Jasper Halloway's office, and I put my face in my hands, and I cried the way a person cries when a debt they didn't know they owed is suddenly paid. Not just for what was lost, but for the 15 years I had spent believing I was alone in this world, believing that no one had ever wondered where I was, believing I was the kind of person no one would ever look for. But someone had looked. Jasper handed me a handkerchief, a real one, white cotton with the initials JTH embroidered in one corner. He waited. He didn't say a word. He just waited for me to be able to breathe again. "There's more," he said gently, "but it can wait until tomorrow if you'd like." "How much more?" He opened a drawer and pulled out a leather folder. He set it on the desk between us. "Your grandfather left you Willow Creek Farm, 180 acres, the main house, the barn, and the outbuildings. He also left you $890,000 in a trust that becomes fully yours on your 21st birthday. Until then, I'm the trustee. Your property taxes are paid through the end of next year. The house needs work, but it's yours, Miss Ashby, every board of it." I couldn't speak. $890,000. Just 3 days ago, I had $142 in a sock at the bottom of a trash bag. "There's one more thing," Jasper said. "Your grandfather asked me to give you this." He reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a brass key. It was old and heavy. It had a strange shape at the top like a bell. "He said you would know what to do with it." I took the key. It was warm from being close to his heart. "Where do I go?" I asked. "Where's the farm?" Jasper smiled for the first time. "I'll drive you, Miss Ashby. It's about 6 miles east of town, and I think you should see it before dark." He drove an old blue Ford pickup with a bench seat that smelled like pipe tobacco and clean laundry. We rolled out of Ashford on a 2-lane road that ran straight through fields of harvested wheat. The stubble caught the last of the light and turned to gold. The sky went from blue to lavender to a deep, aching pink. We passed a mailbox that said Hollis. We passed a mailbox that said Callahan. And then Jasper slowed the truck and pulled onto a gravel road. And there at the end of a long lane of oak trees standing against the pink sky was Willow Creek Farm. The house was Victorian. 2 stories with a wraparound porch and a turret on the east side. It had been white once. Now the paint was peeling like the skin of a snake shedding. The porch sagged a little on one side. Some of the windows were boarded up. The garden was overgrown, but the roof was solid. The walls were straight. And behind the house, standing like a cathedral against the wheat, was the barn. The barn was massive, 2 stories tall on the outside, or so it looked. Weathered red boards, a big sliding door, a weather vane on top shaped like a running horse. I got out of the truck. My feet crunched on the gravel. The wind was moving through the wheat. I could hear it, a soft sound, like a river. I stood there in that pink light and I looked at my grandfather's house, and something inside my chest that had been closed for a very long time cracked open. Not broken. Opened. He built the barn himself, Jasper said, coming up beside me. In '76. Took him 2 years. Wouldn't let anyone help. Said he had to do it right. Why? Jasper looked at me for a long moment. Miss Ashby, your grandfather was not just a clockmaker. He was a man who kept secrets for a living. And I think he kept his biggest one right here. That night, my first night in my grandfather's house, I slept on a dusty sofa in the front parlor because I couldn't bring myself to go upstairs yet. Jasper had left me a bag of groceries and a flashlight and the number to call if anything went wrong. He said he would come check on me in the morning. The house was quiet. Not empty quiet. The quiet of a place that had been waiting. I lay on that sofa in the dark and I listened. The house creaked. The wind pushed against the windows. Somewhere out in the fields a coyote called, and another one answered. And then at 2 in the morning I heard it. A sound coming from outside, from the barn. Scrape, thud, scrape, thud, slow, rhythmic, like a heartbeat that had never stopped. I sat up on the sofa. My blood went cold. Someone was in the barn. Or something was. I picked up the flashlight. I walked out onto the porch in my socks and jeans. The night was full of stars. The Milky Way stretched across the whole sky like a road no one had ever traveled. I had never seen it before. I stopped for a full second just to look up. Then I heard it again. Scrape, thud. I walked across the yard toward the barn. The grass was wet with dew. The barn door was closed. I pulled it open, and the hinges screamed like they hadn't moved in years. The inside of the barn smelled like old hay and cold iron. My flashlight beam cut across empty stalls, rusted tools hanging on the walls, a workbench covered in dust. Nothing was moving. Nothing was there. But the sound kept going. Scrape, thud. It was coming from above me, from the loft. I remembered my grandfather's letter. Look under the 3rd floorboard from the door. I got down on my knees. I counted the wide old planks with my hand. 1, 2, 3. I ran my fingers along the edge of the 3rd board. There was a notch. I pulled. The board came up easily. Too easily. It had been made to lift. Underneath, in a hollow scooped out of the earth, was a small metal box. Inside the box was a folded note. And on top of the note was a second brass key. Bigger than the first. Ornate. Beautiful. I opened the note. It was in the same handwriting. My Wren. If you found this, you found the beginning. The pendulum in the barn has been running for decades. If you can hear it, it means I am still waiting for you. Find the door behind the east wall. What you see will change everything you thought you knew about our family. Love, Grandpa. Let me stop for one moment, because I need to tell you something. Some of you watching this right now have had a moment in your own life where a door opened that you did not expect. A letter, a phone call, a stranger who knew your name, and you had to choose whether to step through it or turn back. If that has ever happened to you, comment below and tell me. What did you choose? Because I want you to know something. Whatever Wren was about to walk into, she was not going alone, and neither are you. I stood there in the dark holding a brass key and a note from a dead man, and I understood for the first time in my life that my story wasn't over. My story was just beginning. Above me in the dark of the loft in a barn that, from the outside, was clearly only 2 stories tall, something was making a sound like a great mechanical heart. Scrape, thud, scrape, thud. I did not sleep that night. I sat on the sofa in my grandfather's parlor with the 2 brass keys in my lap, and I waited for the sun. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear it. That slow, steady sound from the barn. Scrape, thud, like a clock that had been left running when everyone else went home. At dawn, I made coffee on the old percolator in the kitchen. I had never used one before. It burned my tongue. It tasted like the best thing I had ever put in my mouth. I drove into Ashford in Jasper's old pickup, which he had left with me for the week. The morning was cool and the fields were silver with frost. I parked on Main Street. I walked into Millie's Diner because it was the only place with the lights on, and I sat at the counter and ordered biscuits and gravy because that was the cheapest thing on the menu. The woman behind the counter was in her 60s. She had a gray braid down her back and hands that had done real work. Her name tag said Millie. She poured me coffee without asking. "You're the Ashby girl," she said. "Silas's granddaughter." "How did you know?" "Because you have his mouth, honey. Same shape. Same little downturn when you're thinking." She smiled at me, and I couldn't quite believe it, but her eyes filled up with water. "He would come in here every Sunday morning for 40 years. Sat right where you're sitting, ordered the same breakfast, 2 eggs, wheat toast, black coffee, and every year on your birthday he would come in and he would order a slice of chocolate cake and he would eat it real slow and he would say to me, 'Millie, one of these days that girl's going to walk through that door.'" I put my fork down. I couldn't eat. "Well," Millie said, wiping her eyes with her apron, "here you are, he was right." Before I could say anything, the bell over the door jingled. An older woman walked in. She was tall, thin, in her 70s, with silver hair pinned up neat, and a face that had seen every weather Kansas could throw at a person. She was wearing a barn coat over a purple sweater. She walked straight to my stool like she had been looking for me. "You must be Wren." I nodded. She put her hand on my shoulder. Her hand was strong and warm. "Sweet Lord in heaven, you look just like your grandmother." "My grandmother." "Alawan, Silas's wife. She passed the year you were born. He never got over her. Never even tried." She held out her hand. "I'm Odessa Callahan. I live on the farm next to yours. Your grandpa was my best friend for 52 years, and I have been praying every single day for you to come home." Something in me went very still. Home. She sat down next to me at the counter. Millie brought her a cup of coffee without asking. Odessa took my hand between both of hers, and she held it, and she looked at my face like she was trying to memorize it. "Child, we don't have much time, because after breakfast, we need to talk. And you need to hear some things that are going to hurt, but I promise you every last one of them is proof that you were loved." Let me pause here for a moment, because I know a lot of you have people in your lives who love you, but you didn't always know it. A grandparent you never got to say goodbye to. A parent who couldn't say the words. If someone loved you and you found out too late, I want you to comment their name below. Just their first name. Let's remember them together before we keep going. Odessa took me back to her farm. Her kitchen was warm and it smelled like cinnamon and coffee. She sat me down at a round oak table and she brought out a wooden box. Not fancy, just a plain pine box with a leather strap around it. "Your grandfather gave this to me 2 years ago," she said. "He said, Odie, if I die before I find her, you make sure she gets this. Don't give it to anyone else. Not lawyers, not officials. Not that woman she called mother. You put this in her hands." She slid the box across the table. I opened it. Inside were letters, stacks and stacks of letters. All of them addressed to Wren Ashby in that same careful cursive. All of them stamped in red ink. "Return to sender. Address unknown." I picked one up. The postmark was 2011. I would have been 6 years old. I picked up another. 2013, then 2015, then 2017, then every single year, all the way up to April of this year. There were more than 200 letters. "He wrote you every month, honey," Odessa said quietly. "Some months more than once. He tried every address he could find. Group homes, caseworker offices, state agencies. Everyone came back. Delphine had made sure of that." I couldn't breathe. 200 letters, 15 years, from a man who never gave up on me, from a man I had been told was dead. I opened one at random. It was dated November of 2016. I would have been 11. "My Wren, today it snowed for the first time this year. I made a snowman in the yard and I put a red scarf on him because your grandmother used to love red scarves. I hope wherever you are you have a warm coat. I hope someone is being kind to you. I made you a little clock this week, a small pocket watch with your name on the back. I keep winding it. I will keep winding it every day until I can put it in your hand. All my love, Grandpa." I put the letter down, and I sat in Odessa's kitchen, and I cried until I couldn't cry anymore. Odessa didn't say a word. She just moved her chair close to mine, and she put her arm around me, and she let me cry into the shoulder of an old purple sweater like I was 5 years old again. When I finally stopped, she poured me a glass of water. She sat across from me, and then she said the thing that would change everything. "Wren, there is something else. Something your grandfather was afraid to put in writing. He told me a week before he died, and I need to tell you now, because it is not safe for you to be at that farm without knowing. Tell me, she took a breath. Your grandfather did not die of natural causes, honey. He was murdered, and he knew it was going to happen. I stared at her. Odessa, what are you talking about? Silas got sick this past March, slowly, like something was working on him from the inside. His heart started skipping. He got weak. The doctor here in town told him he was just old and to accept it. But your grandfather was 78, and he was strong as a horse the day before. He didn't believe it. He went up to Kansas City, and he had blood work done at a private lab. And when the results came back, they showed something in his system that should not have been there. A drug, a heart medication in the wrong dose. He hadn't been prescribed it. He hadn't taken it. Somebody had been giving it to him. Who? He didn't know for sure, but he had a suspicion. And that suspicion had a name. Delphine. Odessa nodded. Silas had been looking into her for 15 years, Wren. Ever since your father died. Because your father died of the exact same symptoms. And Silas had always suspected that too. The room went quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming. I could hear a rooster crowing somewhere far off. My father had not died of heart failure. My father had been killed. And my grandfather, who had spent 15 years trying to prove it, had been killed by the same hand. I stood up. I was shaking. I need to see the barn. I need to see what he left me. Odessa nodded. She stood up too. There is one more person you need to meet first, because you cannot open what your grandfather built alone. He designed it that way on purpose, and I know exactly who can help you. His name was Wyatt Rennick. He was 34 years old. He had been a Navy engineer for 8 years, and he had come home to Kansas 2 years earlier with what Odessa called the kind of quiet that men carry when they have seen too much. He lived on the farm next to Odessa's. He worked as a restoration carpenter, fixing old barns and old houses across 3 counties. Odessa called him from her kitchen phone. He said he would come. He pulled up in a battered gray truck 20 minutes later. He was tall, broad in the shoulders, brown hair cut short, a quiet face with dark eyes that watched everything and gave away nothing. He shook my hand once, and he didn't let go for a second longer than was polite. And I felt something in me that had been asleep for 20 years wake up and pay attention. I was sorry to hear about your grandfather, Miss Ashby, he said. He was a good man. He was... Wyatt looked at me, and something in his face softened. He was the only person in this town who spoke to me when I came home from overseas, ma'am. When everyone else was afraid of what I might do or say, your grandfather sat next to me in the diner, and he asked me about the stars. He said, "Son, the stars don't care where you've been. They just keep on shining. You do the same." That was the first sentence anyone spoke to me in 6 months that made me want to keep going. So I owe him. Whatever you need. It's already paid for. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. He looked at Odessa. She nodded back. "Show me the barn," he said. We drove back to Willow Creek Farm in Wyatt's truck. Odessa followed in her own. When we pulled up to the barn, Wyatt got out and just stood there for a full minute looking at it. Not moving. Just looking. "What is it?" I asked. "Miss Ashby, have you ever really looked at this barn from the outside?" "Yes." "How tall would you say it is?" I looked up. The peak of the roof was high above me. The weather vane turned slowly in the morning wind. 30 feet, maybe a little more. That's what I thought too. He walked to his truck and pulled out a laser measuring device. He aimed it at the peak. 31 feet 3 inches from the ground to the ridge. "Okay, now let's go inside." We walked into the barn. He aimed the laser at the ceiling of the loft. 20 feet 1 inch. He turned to me. "There is 11 feet of space in this barn that is not accounted for. 11 vertical feet running the entire length of a 50-foot barn. That is a room, Miss Ashby, a big one, and someone hid it very carefully." We searched for 2 hours. We climbed into the hayloft. We tapped every wall. We looked behind every rusted tool. Nothing. Not a hatch, not a door, not a seam. I was starting to lose hope when Wyatt stopped at the east wall of the loft. He ran his hand along the boards. He tapped once, twice. This wall is hollow behind it. He looked around. In the corner of the loft was an old saddle rack, heavy oak, bolted to the floor. Help me move this. It took both of us. We rocked it. We unbolted the base with a wrench from Wyatt's truck. Finally, we slid it sideways. Behind it cut into the wall so cleanly that you would never have seen it if you did not know to look was a door. A perfect rectangle in the wood grain. No knob, no hinges visible, just a single small brass keyhole. I pulled the big brass key from my pocket, the one from under the floorboard. I slid it into the lock. It turned with a sound like a bell. The door opened inward. A rush of cold air came out. It smelled like brass and old paper and lavender. And somewhere behind that door in the darkness, I could hear the scrape and thud louder now. Alive. Waiting. Wyatt turned on his flashlight. Miss Ashby, whatever's in there, we go in together. Stay behind me until we know what we're looking at. I nodded. We stepped through the door. The stairs were narrow and steep, wooden, each step polished smooth by hands. We climbed up into the dark and the sound grew louder. And then at the top of the stairs, Wyatt lifted his flashlight and the beam caught a wall of glass above our heads and light came pouring down. I let out a sound I did not know I could make. The hidden third floor of the barn was a workshop. But not just any workshop. It was a cathedral of brass and glass. A vast open room lit by a huge skylight that from the outside must have looked like a simple vent. The walls were lined with hundreds of clocks, ticking, all of them ticking. Grandfather clocks, pocket watches on velvet, ship's chronometers in wooden cases, clocks with dancing figurines, clocks with the phases of the moon. Every clock in the room told the exact same time. And in the center of the room, dominating everything, was a great brass cylinder, 12 feet across, rising from floor to ceiling. Below it, a heavy iron block hung from a chain, sliding slowly along a wooden track. Scrape, thud, that was the sound. Not a ghost, not a stranger, just my grandfather's heart, still beating, waiting for me. Wyatt let out a low breath. Miss Ashby, your grandfather was not a man who fixed clocks. Your grandfather was a genius. I walked slowly through the room. I touched the brass wall of the great cylinder. It was cool and smooth as a river stone. On a workbench by the skylight, I saw a leather-bound book. Its cover was embossed in gold leaf. Silas Ashby, Client Ledger. I opened it. I turned the pages carefully. And what I saw made me sit down on the workbench because my legs stopped holding me. Names, old names, names from history, Rockefeller, Astor, Kennedy, Vanderbilt, Mellon. Beside each name and entry, vault installed private residence, 1968. Wall safe Palm Beach, 1972. Climate-controlled compartment, Hyde Park Estate, 1979. My grandfather had not just built clocks. My grandfather had built vaults for the richest families in America. He had spent 50 years hiding things for people who could not risk being seen keeping them. And then on the last page, dated November of 2009, I saw a name that stopped my heart. Thomas Ashby, Willow Creek Farm, vault installed, client class family, beneficiary E. Ren Ashby only. My father had been my grandfather's last client. My father had asked him to hide something. For me. Let me stop for one moment. If you have been with me this whole time, I want to ask you to do one small thing. Hit the subscribe button and tell me in the comments what you think Silas was hiding. What do you think a father would trust his own father to protect for the daughter he might not live to see grow up? I want to hear your guesses before we open that vault. Because what Ren is about to find is going to change everything. Now, let me tell you what happened next. The great brass cylinder had no keyhole, no dial, no handle of any kind. Just a small iron bucket hanging on a secondary chain and mounted on the wall beside it a chalkboard with an equation written in white chalk. The chalk had somehow survived all these years. Wyatt read it aloud. The door yields only to the rhythm of time. The pendulum must swing at a period of 4.22 seconds. Calculate the required mass. Underneath was a physics formula, the period of a physical pendulum. Wyatt stared at it for a long time. He built a lock that only opens if you understand him, Wyatt said. This is beautiful. Can you solve it? I can try. He took out a small notebook and a pencil. He wrote for 10 minutes. He set the first weight in the bucket. 10 kilograms. He set a second. 15. He adjusted. The pendulum began to swing. Faster, faster. And then somewhere deep in the cylinder, a mechanism clicked. A thin jet of red ink shot from a hidden nozzle and splattered across the workbench. Wyatt jumped back. Warning shot, he said. He's telling us we're wrong. He said one more mistake, and I bet the whole vault seals forever. I stared at the red ink drying on the wood. My grandfather, even in death, even now, still protecting me from getting it wrong. Odessa came up the stairs behind us out of breath. In her hand was a small brown leather notebook. Wren, honey, I forgot. Silas gave this to me the same day he gave me the letters. He said, if she needs help with the last door, this will tell her. I took the notebook. I opened it to the last page. In my grandfather's careful hand, one line. 14.6 kilograms, 32 pounds, 3 ounces. Trust your grandfather. Wyatt smiled for the first time since I had met him. A real smile. A tired, beautiful smile. Well, all right then. He removed the weights. He measured out 14.6 kilograms exactly. He lowered them into the bucket. The pendulum began to swing, slow, steady, perfect. Deep inside the great brass cylinder, a chain moved. A gear turned. A latch dropped into a groove with a sound like a church bell. And then, with a hiss of releasing air, the vault door swung open on hydraulic hinges. 1,000 pounds of steel and brass opening as smoothly as a kitchen cabinet. Warm light poured out from inside. The inside of the vault was small, maybe 8 feet across. The walls were lined with polished walnut. There was a single wooden desk. On the desk was a leather satchel, a wooden box, a metal file box with a padlock, a framed photograph, and sitting in the center of it all, tied with a red ribbon, a thick stack of paper. A letter. The last one. I stepped inside my grandfather's vault. Wyatt waited at the door. Odessa put her hand over her mouth. I picked up the framed photograph first. I turned it over. I sat down on the floor. It was a photograph of me. I was maybe 4 years old. I was sitting on the porch of Willow Creek Farm in a yellow dress, holding a small wooden horse. And behind me, kneeling down with his arm around me, was an older man with silver hair and my exact same mouth. He was laughing. I was laughing. It was one of the most beautiful photographs I had ever seen. I had no memory of the day it was taken, but I had been here. I had been to this farm. My father had brought me here when I was small, and I had sat on that porch with my grandfather, and he had loved me. I picked up the wooden box next. I lifted the lid. Inside, on a bed of blue velvet, was a small brass pocket watch. On the back, engraved in careful letters, for Wren, on her 5th birthday, from Grandpa who loves her. And beneath that, in newer engraving, added at some point in the 15 years that followed. Still winding, still waiting, every day. The watch was ticking. It had been wound. Sometime in the last week of his life, an old man with a failing heart had wound the watch he made for a granddaughter he might never see. Every single day, for 15 years. He had wound it every day. I held the watch to my ear. Tick, tick, tick. 15 years of a heart that would not stop. I opened the letter with shaking hands, and I began to read the words that would explain a lifetime. My dearest Wren, if you are reading this, my worst fear came true. I did not reach you in time. I am so sorry, my girl. I am so sorry. Sit down. This is going to be hard. But you deserve the truth, and I have carried it long enough. Your father Thomas was my only son. He was a good man, quiet, kind. He worked the land like his grandfather before him. Your mother Margaret was a school teacher. She died in a car accident when you were 3. It was a terrible loss. Your father was never the same. 1 year after your mother died, your father met a woman named Delphine at a business dinner in Kansas City. She was beautiful. She was polished. She said all the right things. Your father was lonely and he was vulnerable, and he did not see her clearly. 6 months later, they were married. 6 months after that, he started getting sick. Wren, I want you to listen to me carefully. Your father was 34 years old. He had the heart of a farmer. He had never been sick a day in his life, and then in the space of a year, he began to fade. His heart raced. He couldn't catch his breath. His doctor could not find a cause. I begged him to come home to me. I begged him to leave her. He said I was jealous of his new life. He said I did not understand. He was a proud man and she was very clever, and by the time he saw the truth, it was too late. After he died, I hired a private investigator. He found records showing that Delphine had purchased large quantities of a heart medication under a false name in the year before your father's death. She was not a nurse. She had no reason to have that medication. And your father had died of complications from that same medication being present in his system in doses no doctor had ever prescribed. I took my findings to the police. They said the evidence was circumstantial. They said I was a grieving father looking for someone to blame. They closed the case. Delphine took you and disappeared. I hired investigator after investigator. Every time we got close, she moved you again. She used my son's death benefits to bury your paperwork inside the foster system. She paid people to lose your file. She made you a ghost, my Wren. She stole you from me. I never stopped looking. I wrote you a letter every month. I sent you a gift every birthday and every Christmas. All of them came back. 3 months ago, I started getting sick again. My heart. The same symptoms as your father. I knew what it meant. I knew she had found me. I do not know how. But I knew what she was doing. So I made this vault. I made it beautiful. I made it strong. I put inside it everything you will need. In the leather satchel, you will find copies of every document I gathered on Delphine over 15 years. Photographs, financial records, the lab results from your father's autopsy that the coroner buried. Everything. Give it to the FBI in Kansas City. Do not give it to the sheriff here. Do not give it to anyone in Ashford. Delphine has money and money buys silence. In the wooden box is the pocket watch I made for you. I wound it every day for 15 years. Wear it. It will remind you that time was on our side even when it did not feel that way. In the file box is the deed to Willow Creek Farm and the account information for your trust. My Wren, my beautiful girl. Please forgive me for not finding you sooner. Please forgive me for dying before I could hold you one more time. Please know that you were loved. Every hour, every day, every year. You were never alone, not even for 1 minute. Love, Grandpa. I sat on the floor of that vault and I read the letter 3 times. Wyatt eventually came in and sat down beside me. He did not speak. He just sat with me. And Odessa stood in the doorway with tears on her cheeks. And the great pendulum of the barn kept its slow, patient beat. Scrape, thud. Somewhere in the depths of the room an old grandfather clock chimed. And then another, and another, until the entire workshop was singing. It was 10 o'clock at night. My first full day in Kansas. That was when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked down. Unknown number. I answered. Corbin's voice on the other end, but different now. No more slick, no more fake concern, just cold. Sis, my mother and I are on the road. We'll be in Ashford tomorrow night. We know where the farm is. We know what he built for you. We are going to have a conversation. Just family. And Wren. What? Don't call the police. My mother wouldn't like that. And you have already seen what happens to people my mother doesn't like. The line went dead. Wyatt looked at me. His jaw was tight. Outside, past the great skylight, past the stars, headlights swept slow along Willow Creek Road. A dark truck, moving without any hurry at all. They were already here. The next 24 hours would decide the rest of my life. Wyatt drove me straight to Odessa's farmhouse. He did not ask permission. He just took the leather satchel from the vault, put it under his arm, and said, "You are not sleeping at that farm tonight." I did not argue. Odessa met us at her kitchen door in her nightgown and a wool robe. She took one look at my face and she picked up the phone. "I'm calling Pastor Ellsworth," she said, "and then I'm calling every soul in this town who owes your grandfather a favor." Which honey is every soul in this town? Pastor Ellsworth arrived within 20 minutes. He was 62 years old. He had thick gray hair and eyes the color of wet slate, and he had preached at the Methodist Church for 30 years. He listened to my story without interrupting. He looked at the photograph of me and my grandfather. He looked at the pocket watch. He looked at the file box. Then he stood up. He put on his jacket. Miss Ashby, my younger brother is a supervisory special agent with the FBI in Kansas City. He owes me a favor from when he was 17, and I got him out of some foolishness with a stolen tractor. I am going to call him right now. Pastor, it's late. Ma'am, my brother has been waiting his entire career for a woman like you to walk into his office. Please, let me make the call. He walked out onto Odessa's porch with his phone. I watched him through the window. He spoke for a long time. When he came back in, he was smiling for the first time. He is driving here tonight. He'll be here by 2 in the morning. He is bringing 2 other agents with him. They have been investigating your stepmother for something called wire fraud for the last 2 years. What you have in that satchel is what they needed to move on her for murder. Let me pause, because I want to say something to the older women who are watching this, to the grandmothers, to the aunts, to the church ladies, to the women who bring casseroles when someone dies, to the women who remember birthdays and send Christmas cards and call to check on people, to the women who make small towns work. You are the reason people like Wren survive. You are the reason communities hold. When Odessa Callahan picked up a phone, a whole town moved, and there is nothing more powerful than that. If you have ever been the woman who showed up for someone who had nobody, comment below and tell me. I want the world to see who you are. Now let me tell you what happened next. By 2 in the morning, Odessa's kitchen was full of people. Pastor Ellsworth's brother, Special Agent Marlene Whitfield, arrived from Kansas City. She was 45. She had steel gray hair cut short and a face that had seen every kind of criminal America can produce. She was accompanied by 2 other agents, a young woman named Ramirez and a broad-shouldered man named Dean. Agent Whitfield spread my grandfather's evidence across Odessa's kitchen table. She read for 2 hours. When she finally looked up, her jaw was set like concrete. Miss Ashby, she said, your grandfather did our job for us. This is one of the cleanest evidence files I have ever seen. If we can get her to make a statement, we can bring charges against your stepmother for the murder of Thomas Ashby, the attempted murder of Silas Ashby, and roughly a dozen counts of financial fraud. What do you need? We need her to come to the farm tomorrow night, and we need her to talk. We made a plan. At 7 the next evening, the sun set over the wheat fields of Willow Creek Farm. I sat on the front porch of my grandfather's house in a clean sweater and jeans, my hair brushed, the porch light on, looking like a scared young woman who did not know she was being watched over by 6 federal agents with recording equipment hidden in every room of the parlor. Wyatt was inside in the kitchen with a wireless earpiece. Odessa was down the road at her own farm. Agent Whitfield and her team were in the barn, and I was sitting on my porch waiting for the woman who had killed my father to come sit next to me. The headlights turned onto Willow Creek Road at 7:42, a black rental sedan, wildly out of place on a gravel road. It rolled up to the porch and stopped. 2 doors opened. Delphine got out of the passenger side. She was wearing a cream-colored coat with a fur collar. In Kansas, in September. She looked like a woman going to the opera. Her hair was blonde, done up in a French twist. Her makeup was perfect. She smiled at me with the same cold smile I remembered from when I was 5 years old. Wren, look at you. You are just as pretty as I imagined. Corbin got out of the driver's side. He was tall and thin and expensive looking in a suit that had no business in a wheat field. He was already sweating. Sis. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. My grandfather had held on for 15 years to protect me. I could hold on for the next 15 minutes. Come inside, I said. I made coffee. They came inside. They sat on the sofa in my grandfather's parlor under the framed photograph of me and him on the porch. Delphine crossed her legs. Corbin sat forward with his elbows on his knees. I sat across from them in my grandfather's old armchair, the one that still had the shape of his shoulders pressed into the back. Delphine looked around the room. She wrinkled her nose slightly at the wallpaper. So this is where he lived. My goodness. It is exactly what I expected. You have never been here. Of course not, darling. Silas and I did not see eye to eye. Your father knew that. Then how did you know where the farm was, Delphine? How did you know he had died? How did you and Corbin have his estate paperwork before I even knew he existed? Delphine's smile did not move, but her eyes did. Just a flicker. Your grandfather was a strange man, Wren. He put us in his will years ago and then took us out. His attorney sent us notices. That is all. His attorney is Jasper Halloway. He says he has never spoken to either of you. Corbin shifted in his seat. Delphine tilted her head slightly. Wren, sweetheart, let's not do this. Let's talk about what we came here to talk about. This farm, this estate. Your grandfather left you a great deal of money and a great deal of responsibility. You are 20 years old. You have never lived on your own. You have no education, no work history, no experience. Corbin and I are prepared to be very generous. We will pay you a lump sum, and we will take these headaches off your hands. $1 million, Wren, to a girl who 3 weeks ago had nothing. Think about what that could do for your life. I looked at her. I really looked at her. This woman who had held my hand when I was 4 and led me into a state office and told a stranger I had no family. This woman who had killed my father and made me a ghost. Why did you tell me my grandfather was dead? I did not, darling. You misremember. I remember every word. You were 5. You remember nothing correctly. I stood up. I walked to the mantel. I picked up the framed photograph of me and Grandpa on the porch. I brought it back and I set it on the coffee table between us. Delphine looked at the picture. Her face did not change, but the pulse in her throat began to beat visibly. He wrote me 200 letters, Delphine. He tried every address in the system. Every single letter came back because you paid people to make me disappear. That is ridiculous. He knew you killed my father. The room went very still. Corbin's hand went white on his knee. Delphine laughed. A brittle, high-wrong laugh. Wren, sweetheart, that old man was paranoid. His mind was going. He said terrible things about a lot of people. You cannot possibly believe. He had lab results. He had bank records showing the medication you bought. He had the receipts. He had a private detective's report, all of it. He gave it to the FBI last night. That was the sentence. That was the sentence that broke her. Delphine's face went white under her makeup. Her mouth opened. She looked at Corbin. Corbin's mouth was hanging open like a fish. Delphine looked back at me, and something ugly rose up behind her eyes. You stupid little girl, she said very quietly. Mom, Corbin said. Mom, don't. But the mask was cracking now. The years and the lies and the fury were pouring out. You think you understand anything, she hissed. You think you know what it was like your father did not love me. He never loved me. He mourned that dead school teacher every day of our marriage. He talked about her in his sleep. He put her picture on the mantle. He took me on our honeymoon and cried in the bathroom. And then he wanted a divorce. He was going to leave me with nothing after 2 years of my life. 2 years I spent on that miserable man. 2 years watching him hold you like you were made of glass. He loved you. He did not love me. He was going to give you everything and leave me on the street. Well, I made sure of that. I made sure he never left me anywhere. And that old man of yours could not prove a thing for 15 years. He should have stayed retired. He should have stopped writing those letters. He should not have hired that detective again this spring. Mom, Corbin was on his feet. Mom stopped talking, but Delphine could not stop. 15 years of holding it in. It was pouring out of her like poison from a lanced wound. That old man was going to send everything to the FBI. I saw the file on his desk when I visited in March. Yes, I visited. He let me in. He was a lonely, stupid old man, and I told him I wanted to make peace. And I made him tea. And I made him tea every day I was there. And when I left, he was already sick, and he did not know why. Just like your father. Just like your father exactly. So do not sit there in that ugly chair and pretend you know anything about my life or what I had to do to survive. I did not say a word. I did not need to. The front door opened. Agent Whitfield walked into the parlor, followed by Agent Ramirez and Agent Dean and 2 sheriff's deputies from a neighboring county who had no ties to Ashford or Delphine's money. Delphine Cross, Agent Whitfield said in a voice as flat as a Kansas horizon. You are under arrest for the murder of Thomas Ashby, the attempted murder of Silas Ashby, wire fraud and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent, which, ma'am, I strongly recommend you consider using. Delphine looked at the agents. She looked at me. She stood up very slowly, and in that moment she was not a beautiful woman anymore. She was small, she was old, she was empty. She had traded her whole life for money, and the money had just walked out the door. Corbin was arrested for conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. His mother's confession, recorded clean and unbroken on federal equipment, would carry her all the way to a life sentence 6 months later. Corbin, who had known about the money but sworn under oath, he had known nothing about the medicine, would serve 4 years. That night, all I knew was that they were both walked out of my grandfather's house in handcuffs. Delphine did not look at me as she went. Corbin did. His eyes were wet. "Sis," he said quietly. His voice was cracked small, like a boy caught in a room where a fire had started without him. "For what it's worth, I did not know about your dad, I swear it on my life. She told me he had a bad heart. She only ever told me about the money." I did not answer him. There was nothing to say. The agents took them away. The porch light went out one by one down the driveway as the taillights disappeared. Wyatt came out of the kitchen. He walked over to me. He did not say anything. He just took my hand, and I held his back like it was a rope thrown to a drowning person. Odessa came up onto the porch. She looked at me. She held out her arms. I walked into them, and I stayed there for a long time. 2 weeks later, we buried a memory. There was no body to lay to rest. My grandfather had already been cremated by the county, but the town of Ashford held a memorial service for Silas Ashby at the Methodist Church, and every single seat was filled. Farmers in Sunday suits, waitresses in clean aprons, widows with silver hair, children in cowboy boots. Every soul who had known my grandfather for the last 50 years came to say goodbye. I stood at the pulpit. I held one of his letters in my hand, the oldest one, from 2011, when I was 6 years old. I read it out loud. "My Wren, today it is your birthday. You are 6 years old. I do not know what you look like now. I do not know what your favorite color is. I do not know if anyone is baking you a cake. But I know that somewhere you are turning 6. And I want you to know that in Ashford, Kansas, an old man baked a cake today with your name on it in blue icing. And he ate a slice on the porch, and he watched the sunset. And he thought about you the entire time. Happy birthday, my beautiful girl. I love you more than the whole big Kansas sky. Grandpa." I could barely finish it. The church was silent. Odessa was crying in the front pew. Millie was crying at the back. Wyatt was standing beside the door with his hat in his hands. Pastor Ellsworth put his hand on my shoulder as I stepped down. And after the service, the whole town came to the farm. They brought food, they brought flowers, they brought stories. Gideon Hollis, 70 years old, a rancher who lived down the road, told me about the day my grandfather helped him pull a calf during a thunderstorm in 1988. Frank from the feed store told me about the time my grandfather paid off his mortgage anonymously during the farm crisis of the 80s and told him it was from the church. Millie told me about the year my grandfather bought Christmas presents for every child at the elementary school because a fire had destroyed the local charity. I sat on the porch of Willow Creek Farm, and I listened to 50 years of my grandfather's kindness pouring out of the mouths of strangers who had loved him. Let me stop just for a moment, because I want to ask you something. In your life, has there ever been a moment when you learned who a person really was after they were gone? A neighbor, a parent, a grandparent, a friend? When you found out the truth of who they had been and it made you love them even more? Tell me in the comments. I want to remember these good souls together with you. Now let me tell you how it ended. 6 months later, I turned 21. Odessa baked me a cake, chocolate with blue icing, just like the one my grandfather had baked for me on my 6th birthday. She wrote my name across the top in careful cursive. Wyatt gave me a ring made of a small piece of the brass we had polished from the pendulum. He said, "I do not know how to ask a woman anything the right way, but I know how to stand next to one, and I would like to stand next to you." It was not an engagement ring, not yet, but it was a promise. It sat on my right hand for 6 months before it eventually moved to my left. He proposed on the porch of Willow Creek Farm the following spring on the day the first wheat came up green in the fields, and I said yes before he had finished the sentence. But that is another story, for another day. I did not sell Willow Creek Farm. I never even considered it. I used the trust my grandfather left me to restore the main house to what it had been in his time. Fresh white paint, new porch boards, real glass in every window. Wyatt did the work himself on weekends for the price of coffee and lunch. The barn stayed exactly as it was. I would not change a single board of it. The great pendulum still swings up in the loft. It has not stopped once since my grandfather built it in 1976. I go up there every morning with a cup of coffee, and I sit on the workbench and I listen. Scrape, thud, scrape, thud. The heartbeat of a man who loved me before I was born and never stopped. I opened a small workshop in a corner of the barn. I am learning to make clocks. Odessa found me an old master watchmaker in Wichita, Mr. Sorensen, who agreed to teach me for the price of home-cooked meals and a room over the workshop when he wants a break from the city. I am not as good as my grandfather. I do not know if I ever will be, but I am learning. And with the money from the trust, I started something that carries his name, the Silas Ashby Foundation for Girls Who Age Out. It is a scholarship fund. It sends young women coming out of the foster system in Kansas and Missouri to trade schools, watchmaking, carpentry, welding, any craft they want to learn, so that no 20-year-old girl ever has to walk out of the Department of Social Services with a trash bag in her hand and $142 in her pocket and no one waiting on the other side of the door. Every scholarship recipient gets a letter with a check. It is a copy of one of my grandfather's letters to me and a small handwritten note. You were never alone. Not even for 1 minute. Love, Ren. If you know a young woman right now who is struggling to believe she matters, I want you to do something for me today. Just call her, or write her a note, or bring her a hot meal. You do not have to build a foundation to change a life. You just have to be the one voice that says, I see you. I am here. Tell me in the comments who you are going to reach out to this week. Say her first name. Let's remember her together. Odessa is my grandmother now, not by blood, by choice. Every Sunday after church, we eat pot roast at her kitchen table or my kitchen table. And Wyatt sits across from me, and Millie brings pie from the diner, and Pastor Ellsworth stops by for coffee, and Gideon Hollis tells us a story we have already heard twice. And I sit there in the middle of all of it with my grandfather's pocket watch ticking against my heart, and I understand something I did not understand for the first 20 years of my life. Family is not always the people you were born to. Sometimes family is the people who spent 15 years writing letters to a child they were not sure was even alive. Sometimes family is the woman who takes your hand in a diner because you have her best friend's mouth. Sometimes family is a quiet Navy engineer who fixes your porch on a Saturday because a good man once told him the stars did not care where he had been. Sometimes family is a whole town of strangers who show up at midnight when a scared young woman needs someone to stand between her and the wolf. Sometimes family is a great brass pendulum in the loft of a 100-year-old barn, keeping time for you, patient and steady, waiting for you to come home. My grandfather kept that pendulum swinging for 50 years. He wound my little pocket watch for 15. He wrote me 200 letters and never mailed a single one that reached me. He built a vault to hide the truth of who murdered my father, and he made me the only person on earth who could ever open it. He loved me every single day of my life in a small town in Kansas without ever once being able to hold me. And in the end, he brought me home. I found the yellow dress in his closet the week after the funeral, the one from the photograph. He had kept it, folded in tissue paper for 16 years, along with a small wooden horse and a lock of my baby hair tied with a blue ribbon, and a note in his handwriting, for the day she comes back. I keep them all on the mantle now, next to the framed photograph, next to the pocket watch, when I am not wearing it. And every morning when I sit on the porch with my coffee and I watch the sun come up over the wheat fields of Willow Creek Farm, I say the same thing out loud to the empty air. I made it home, Grandpa. I finally made it home. And somewhere in the loft of the old barn, the great pendulum answers me. Scrape, thud, scrape, thud. I love you. I love you. I love you. Thank you for staying with me. Thank you for walking this whole road beside Ren. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone you loved and lost, or someone who loved you when you did not know it, please subscribe to this channel. We tell stories of hope, of second chances, of finding home in the most unexpected places. I want to hear from you in the comments. Who is the person who never gave up on you? What is the moment you knew you were finally home? Share this video with a woman in your life who needs to be reminded that she is not alone tonight. And I will see you again very soon on the porch on the next story. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And remember, no matter how long the road is, someone is always winding the clock for you.